When Megan first mentioned helping her mother financially, it didn't strike me as odd. Her mom had always struggled, and we were fortunate enough to be in a position where $100,000 wouldn't devastate us. It was a lot of money, sure, but family was family, right? I remember that night so clearly. We were sitting on the porch, the sun fading into the horizon. Megan's face was glowing in the golden light, her usual calm demeanor somehow tinged with unease. She was fidgeting with her wedding ring, something she only did when she was nervous. But when she told me her mom needed the money, the worry lines on her forehead softened, and she made it sound like this was the right thing to do. "We've always said we'd help if things got tough," she said softly, her eyes scanning mine for any sign of resistance. I didn't protest. Why would I? Over the years, we built our lives on trust. I had no reason to believe that this time would be any different. I gave her the green light, and just like that, $100,000 evaporated from our joint account. Days passed, then weeks, and I barely thought about the money. Megan said her mom was doing better, but there was always a vagueness in her responses when I asked for details. I should have pressed harder, should have followed that instinct that something wasn't adding up. But I didn't. I was too trusting, too comfortable in the illusion of our perfect marriage. Looking back, I can see the signs, but at the time, I was blind. Completely blind. It was only when I stumbled across the bank statement that my heart sank. I hadn't been snooping. I was just organizing some paperwork when the numbers hit me in the face. The withdrawal wasn't listed under anything remotely connected to Megan's mother or family expenses. Instead, it was a direct transfer to someone named Kyle L. Who the hell was Kyle L? I tried to calm myself, telling myself there was some logical explanation. But as I sat there, staring at the cold, hard proof in front of me, an icy dread began to settle in my gut. Megan had never mentioned anyone by that name. She hadn't mentioned anyone, really, besides her usual friends or colleagues. I was supposed to trust her. After all, this was my wife, the woman I'd built my life with. But I couldn't shake the unease that clawed at my chest, the nagging feeling that something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. And that's when everything started to unravel. I couldn't let it go. The name, Kyle L., haunted me, like a thread dangling from a perfectly woven fabric that I couldn't stop tugging at. I sat there, bank statement in hand, staring at that transfer over and over until I finally gave in to my suspicion. I searched through Megan's phone, something I'd never done before in our 10 years of marriage. There was nothing. No texts, no calls, no mentions of anyone named Kyle. But then I remembered Megan had recently downloaded a new app for work, something to help her stay organized. It sounded innocent enough at the time, but now it felt like a lie. I opened the app. And there it was, an entire thread of messages between Megan and Kyle. It didn't take long to figure out who he was. He wasn't a coworker, a family friend, or anyone remotely connected to her mother. He was a stranger, a man who lived just a couple of towns over. A landscaper, according to his profile, but the conversations between them weren't about gardens or projects. They were personal. Intimate. They were the kind of messages that twisted my stomach into knots. I felt like I was drowning as I scrolled through their chat. The money, the $100,000, had been sent to Kyle, not to Megan's mother. But why? What could possibly justify this betrayal? My hands shook as I pieced it all together. The messages between them weren't just flirtatious, they were explicit. My Megan, the woman I thought I knew inside and out, was having an affair. Not some fleeting emotional affair either, but a full-blown, gut-wrenching betrayal. They talked about meeting up at hotels, about sneaking around when I wasn't home, and how Kyle had a plan for the money. One message stopped me cold. "Kyle, I'm taking it all to Vegas. This will double, babe. We'll have more than enough to leave everything behind." Vegas. My head was spinning, a mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief. Was this some kind of sick joke? Kyle had taken the money, our money, and gambled it? All the while, Megan was feeding me lies about her mother's financial troubles, while she was planning a future with this man? I felt sick, the bow rising in my throat as I realized the depth of her deceit. She hadn't just cheated on me physically, she had lied to me about our future, about our family, and our life. She had taken a massive chunk of our savings and handed it over to her lover, hoping for some kind of fantasy escape. I sat on the couch, my head in my hands, feeling like my world was falling apart piece by piece. The anger was bubbling up inside me, but alongside it was this crushing sadness, a betrayal I couldn't even wrap my head around. I had to confront her. But how do you confront someone when you're not even sure you want to hear their side of the story? When Megan came home that evening, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to know the truth. I couldn't live another second in this painful limbo, wondering how deep this deception went. "Megan," I said, my voice trembling, "we need to talk." She froze, her eyes darting nervously. She knew. Somehow, she knew this conversation was coming. She sat down across from me, and before I could even ask, her face crumbled. Tears welled up in her eyes as she covered her face with her hands. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, but the words felt hollow, like they weren't enough to bridge the growing chasm between us. "Who is Kyle?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my whole body was trembling with rage and betrayal. Her lips quivered as she tried to find the words. "He's someone I met. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I swear I didn't. It was a mistake." "Mistake?" I cut her off, my voice rising. "A mistake is forgetting to pay the bills on time. This isn't a mistake, Megan. This is a deliberate betrayal. You took our money, and you gave it to him. You lied to me about your mom." She sobbed openly now, shaking her head as if that would undo what had already been done. "He promised he would turn it into more. I thought we could just escape." "Escape?" I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "Escape from what, Megan? From me? From our life?" The silence between us was deafening. And then, slowly, she began to speak, revealing the depths of her betrayal in ways I never imagined. The silence stretched on forever, the weight of Megan's tears failing to soften the rage building inside me. Every sob felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. Every word she hadn't yet spoken was dragging me deeper into the pit of disbelief. Finally, she broke the quiet. "It wasn't supposed to be like this, Daniel. I never meant for any of this to happen." Her voice cracked, and she wiped at her face as if that would erase the enormity of what she was about to say. I sat rigid, my arms folded tightly across my chest, trying to brace myself for the storm. "I met Kyle at the gym, of all places," she started, and I could hear the shame dripping from her words. "We just talked at first. He was charming, easy to be around. And I don't know, something clicked in me. I hadn't felt alive like that in so long." I wanted to scream. I hadn't made her feel alive? How had we gone from a loving marriage to this? But I kept my mouth shut, letting her dig the hole deeper. I needed to hear it all. "He asked me to dinner one night," she continued, her voice trembling. "And I went. I told myself it was harmless, that it wasn't anything serious. But it didn't stop there, Daniel. It turned into something more." I felt my chest tighten as her words crashed over me. My worst fears weren't just fears, they were now reality. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a passing indiscretion. It was an affair, plain and simple, and it had gone much further than I could have imagined. "How long?" I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. "How long have you been seeing him?" Megan hesitated, her lip quivering as she looked away. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies. I couldn't even look at her. "And the money?" I asked, cutting through her sobs. "What made you think it was okay to take our money and give it to him? What the hell was going through your head?" She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, her fingers clutched tightly in her lap. "Kyle told me he had a plan," she whispered, as if that made it any better. "He told me that if we just had enough money, he could double it at the casino. He swore he was lucky, that he knew how to play the tables. I believed him, Daniel. I was desperate. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was gambling our future away for some man she barely knew. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my fists clenching so tightly that my knuckles were white. And you thought what, Megan? That you'd run away with him? Leave me and everything we've built? Her face crumpled into a fresh wave of tears. No. I don't know. It wasn't like that at first. I thought it would be quick. That we could get the money back, that it would all be behind us, and no one would have to know. But you didn't get it back, did you? Her head dropped in shame, and the silence that followed was answer enough. Of course they hadn't gotten the money back. Kyle, her lover, this stranger who had charmed his way into my wife's life, had lost every cent of the $100,000. It was all gone, vanished in a night of reckless gambling. The life we'd built together, the security of our savings, gone in an instant. Megan looked up at me, her eyes bloodshot from crying. He lost it all, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Every last dollar. The gravity of her words settled over me like a weight. The betrayal had layers, infidelity, lies, and now financial ruin. I felt like I was suffocating. You gave away everything. I muttered, more to myself than to her. You gave it all away. I stood up, pushing my chair back, needing to put some distance between us. The living room felt too small, too claustrophobic. How could this woman sitting in front of me, the woman I'd loved for years, have made such catastrophic choices? Megan was still crying, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Every sob felt like a reminder of the lies she told, the life she'd been living behind my back. Why didn't you come to me? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Why didn't you tell me the truth, instead of turning to some stranger? She shook her head, her sobs choking her words. I didn't want you to hate me, Daniel. I didn't want to destroy what we had. Well, congratulations, I snapped, the bitterness spilling out before I could stop it. You've managed to do that all on your own. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't know if I could forgive her. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it had poisoned every part of our life. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said softly, staring at her like she was a stranger. Her face crumpled again, and she reached out for me, but I stepped back. I couldn't let her touch me. Not after everything. I need time to think, I muttered, my voice heavy with exhaustion. I need space, Megan. She nodded, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I understand, she whispered. But as I turned to leave the room, I knew things were far from over. She had confessed, yes, but now came the hardest part. What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? Could I forgive her? Could we ever recover from this? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that this was just the beginning of the storm. And I wasn't sure if we'd survive it. The next few days passed in a haze. I couldn't look at Megan without feeling a pit open up in my stomach. I avoided her as much as I could, throwing myself into work, staying out later than usual. I wasn't ready to face the enormity of what had happened, and I sure as hell wasn't ready to forgive her. At night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while the words from our conversation echoed in my mind. Kyle, $100,000. Las Vegas. Every time I thought about it, my anger surged anew. How could someone gamble away such an enormous amount of money without even thinking of the consequences? On the third night after her confession, I woke up from a fitful sleep. It was past midnight, and I heard Megan in the living room. The faint light of the TV flickered under the door, and I could hear her sobbing quietly. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, but a part of me still couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. As angry as I was, seeing her break down wasn't easy. I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to know everything, the full truth, no matter how ugly. Grabbing a blanket, I pushed the door open and stepped into the dimly lit living room. Megan glanced up at me, startled, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. She quickly wiped her eyes, as if that could erase the damage already done. I need to know everything, Megan, I said, my voice steady but cold. I need to understand how we got here. How you thought this was okay. She nodded silently and gestured for me to sit, though I stayed standing. The weight of her betrayal still kept me from wanting to be too close. It wasn't just about the money, she began, her voice hoarse from crying. It wasn't about the money at all, really. It was about how empty I felt. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Empty? We had a house, stability, and years of memories together. What more could she possibly want? I felt like I was fading away, Daniel, she continued, her eyes pleading for understanding. Like I wasn't living anymore, just going through the motions. And then Kyle came along, and he made me feel alive again. It was exciting, dangerous. It made me feel like I mattered. I clenched my fists, the anger bubbling up again. So you needed some guy to make you feel alive? You needed to betray me for that? She flinched at my tone, but she didn't stop. I know it was wrong. I know I ruined everything. But I got caught up in something that felt bigger than me. Kyle promised that with the money, we could start over, leave everything behind and build a new life. I stared at her in disbelief. And you believed him? You believed that throwing away our savings and running off with some random guy would fix your life? Tears welled up in her eyes again, and she nodded, her voice cracking. I was desperate, Daniel. I didn't think clearly. No, I interrupted sharply, my patience running thin. You didn't think at all. You didn't think about me, about us, about our future. You just acted on some selfish impulse, and now everything is gone. You gave him our money, Megan. He gambled it all away. The reality of it was overwhelming. The $100,000 we had worked so hard to save was gone. I thought of all the plans we had, upgrading the house, maybe even starting a business of our own one day. All of that was now nothing but a pipe dream, lost in a haze of Vegas casinos and bad decisions. Megan sobbed uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry, she cried over and over, but the words had lost all meaning. I was too numb to care. Apologies didn't bring back the money. They didn't erase the betrayal. I needed more than tears and regrets. I needed to know why she had done this, how she could have been so reckless. There has to be more, I said quietly. Kyle doesn't just come into your life and convince you to throw everything away. What else is there, Megan? I need to know. She was silent for a long time, her face buried in her hands. I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of another revelation hanging between us. And then, with a deep, shuddering breath, she lifted her head and spoke. Kyle wasn't just some fling, she said, her voice trembling. I loved him, Daniel. The words cut through me like a blade. I staggered back a step, feeling as though the floor had been ripped out from under me. Loved him. She had been in love with this man. The room felt suffocating, the air too thick to breathe. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. It was one thing to cheat, to lie, to be reckless. But love? That was something deeper. Something far more painful. You loved him? I whispered, my voice barely audible. She nodded, her expression hollow. I didn't mean for it to happen. But somewhere along the way, I fell for him. He made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. And I thought, maybe if we ran away together, everything would be okay. The rage flared up inside me, hotter than before. You loved him? I repeated, louder this time. You thought running away with him was the answer to whatever was missing in your life? She didn't respond, just stared at me with those tear-stained eyes, begging for some kind of understanding. But I had none to give. I was empty now, just like she claimed to have been before all this started. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't breathe. I turned toward the door, needing to get out, needing space to process the bombshell she had just dropped on me. Daniel, she called after me, her voice desperate. Please don't leave. Please, I'm begging you. But I was already gone. As I stepped out into the night, I felt like a ghost in my own life. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I had, was gone. And I had no idea if I'd ever get it back. I drove for hours that night, the streets blurred by the tears I refused to shed. I couldn't go home. Home wasn't home anymore. It was just a place where my wife, the woman I loved, had fallen in love with someone else. I tried to focus on the road, tried to breathe, but my mind kept looping through her words. I loved him. How do you come back from that? Eventually, I ended up at a park. It was late, and the world was quiet, but inside me, it was chaos. I sat on a bench, my hands trembling as I tried to make sense of everything. But the truth was, there was no making sense of it. My life had exploded, and there was no way to put the pieces back together. How could she have done this to me? To us? We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. I thought we had a future together. But she had handed that future to someone else, someone who had gambled it away like it meant nothing. I stayed at that park until dawn, lost in my thoughts. By the time the sun crept over the horizon, I knew what I had to do. There was no going back. Not after everything Megan had confessed. This wasn't just about the money, or even the affair. It was about trust. And once that's shattered, what's left? When I finally returned home, Megan was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen from crying all night. She looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes, but I had none to offer her. We need to talk, I said, my voice flat and emotionless. She nodded, her hands trembling as she wiped away a tear. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I'll do anything to fix this. Please, just tell me what I need to do. Her words washed over me like static. She had already said she was sorry. She had already cried and begged. But none of it changed what had happened. None of it could undo the betrayal. You can't fix this, Megan, I said, sitting down across from her. What you've done, it's too much. You didn't just cheat. You didn't just lie. You broke us. Her sobs returned, but this time, I didn't feel pity. I felt hollow. I don't even know who you are anymore, I continued, my voice cold. You took our money. You lied to my face about your mother, and you gave everything to him. And now it's gone. You fell in love with him and I stopped, struggling to keep my voice steady. I was just here, believing in us, believing in you. You were living a completely different life, weren't you? Megan shook her head, reaching out across the table, but I pulled away. I couldn't bear her touch. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. I got lost, Daniel. I don't know who I was during all of this. You were yourself, I said bitterly. That's the problem. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging between us. Her tears fell silently now, but I was too far gone to comfort her. I had spent too many years trying to be the perfect husband, working late to provide, planning vacations, thinking of our future. All the while, she was plotting an escape with another man, one who had torn our life apart. I need you to leave, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. She blinked in shock. Leave? But where will I go? I don't care where you go, I said, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. You need to pack your things and go. I can't look at you right now. Her face twisted with desperation, and she stood, rushing toward me. Daniel, please! Don't do this. Don't throw us away. We can fix this, I swear. I'll do anything. I stepped back, avoiding her outstretched hands. You already threw us away, Megan. I'm just picking up the pieces. Her sobs grew louder, but I remained unmoved. There was no more room for sympathy. This wasn't something that could be healed with apologies or promises of change. I'll stay with my mom, she choked out, defeated. But please, can we talk tomorrow? Can we? I don't know, I interrupted, shaking my head. I don't know what happens next. She packed a bag quickly, her hands shaking the entire time. I watched her leave, the door clicking shut behind her like the final note of a symphony I didn't ask to hear. Once she was gone, the house was eerily quiet. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where she had just been. I wanted to feel relieved that she was gone, but instead, all I felt was emptiness. It should have felt good to push her out, to reclaim my space and my sanity. But the truth was, even though she had broken me, part of me still loved her. And that was the cruelest twist of all. Even after everything, I wasn't sure I could stop loving her. I sat there for hours, replaying everything that had happened. The affair. The money. The lies. And now, the confession of love for another man. It was too much to process. My mind was at war with itself, one part telling me to cut her off forever, the other part reminding me of the good times, the life we had built before everything fell apart. But the good times weren't enough. They couldn't erase what had been done. Megan's betrayal had left scars that wouldn't heal overnight, if ever. I stood up, pacing the living room, my thoughts spinning out of control. I needed clarity. I needed to figure out what came next. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't see a future where things were okay again. Not for me. Not for us. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a long time before dialing my brother. He picked up on the second ring. Dan? His voice was groggy. He was probably still in bed, but I didn't care. I need you to come over, I said, my voice cracking. I need to talk to someone. He didn't ask any questions. I'll be there in 10 minutes. And just like that, I finally let myself break. My brother, Mike, showed up within minutes, just like he promised. He took one look at me and didn't say a word, just pulled me into a hug. I didn't know how much I needed that. For the first time since everything had unraveled, I let the dam break. The tears I had fought so hard to hold back came rushing out, and I clung to him like he was the only thing keeping me from drowning. We sat down on the couch, and after a long silence, he finally spoke. What happened? I wiped my face, trying to find the words. Megan. She's been cheating on me, I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. And it's worse than that. She took $100,000 from our savings. Gave it to some guy she was seeing, Kyle, and he gambled it away in Vegas. Mike's eyes widened. What? How? Why would she do that? I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Because she thought she loved him. Because he made her feel alive. The sarcasm in my voice was thick, but underneath it was the raw, aching pain. And now? It's all gone. Everything we worked for. She's gone. Mike leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Man, I don't even know what to say. That's insane. What are you going to do? That was the million-dollar question. What was I going to do? I hadn't even let myself think that far. I'd spent all my energy just trying to stay afloat, trying to process the betrayal. But now that Megan was gone, the next steps felt like a mountain I had no idea how to climb. I don't know, I admitted, my voice hollow. I kicked her out. She's at her mom's place now. But I can't even wrap my head around what happens next. How do I move on from this? Mike sighed. One step at a time, bro. You can't figure it all out at once. But the first thing you need to do is protect yourself. That money's gone, and who knows what else she might try to pull. I nodded, the practical side of my brain kicking in. He was right. I needed to stop reacting and start acting. I couldn't let this spiral out of control any further. I had to take control of the situation before it completely destroyed me. We need to sort out the finances, I said, rubbing my temples. I've been so focused on the betrayal, but we still have joint accounts. The house. Everything is tied together. Mike sat up straighter. First thing tomorrow, we'll get that sorted. You need to freeze the accounts. Make sure she doesn't pull any more stunts. I nodded, feeling a flicker of clarity for the first time in days. Yeah. I'll call the bank first thing in the morning. But there was more than just the money. There was the looming question of what came next for us. Could I even consider staying in this marriage? Could we ever recover from something like this? I'm gonna see a lawyer, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. Mike gave me a cautious look. You sure about that? You really think you want to end it? I stared at the floor, my mind racing. Part of me still couldn't believe we were at this point. But what choice did I have? Megan had made her decisions, and now I had to make mine. Staying together felt impossible. I don't know, I whispered, my voice cracking. But I need to know what my options are. I need to protect myself. Mike nodded. That's smart. Even if you don't go through with it, knowing where you stand legally is important. Megan already crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. It was surreal, talking about lawyers and divorce when just a few weeks ago, I thought my biggest problem was deciding whether to renovate the kitchen. Now my entire life was unraveling, and I was standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out which pieces I could salvage. I'm gonna need some help, I admitted, glancing over at Mike. I don't even know where to start with all this. He patted my shoulder. I'm here for you, Dan. We'll figure this out. The next morning, I made the calls. I spent hours on the phone with the bank, freezing our joint accounts, making sure Megan couldn't access any more of our savings. Then I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer. Each call felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage, but I knew it had to be done. I couldn't let my emotions get in the way of protecting myself from any more damage. Later that afternoon, I found myself sitting in the lawyer's office, the walls lined with diplomas and plaques. My lawyer, a calm, collected woman named Rachel, sat across from me, pen poised over a notepad. Tell me everything, she said, her eyes sharp and focused. I took a deep breath and told her the whole story, about Megan, the affair, the money, the lies. By the time I finished, Rachel's face was a mixture of professional calm and disbelief. You've done the right thing by freezing the accounts, she said, nodding as she made some notes. But there's more to this. Given the amount of money involved in the deception, this could get complicated. I leaned forward, feeling a knot in my stomach. What do I need to do? I want to be prepared for whatever comes next. Rachel looked at me seriously. First, you need to gather all financial records. Any paperwork that shows where your money went, what's left, and what Megan might still have access to. And I suggest filing for legal separation as soon as possible. This will protect you from any financial decisions she tries to make moving forward. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. And what about the divorce? I don't know if I'm ready to go there yet, but... She gave me a sympathetic look. That's your decision. But given the circumstances, it's not something you should rush into. Take the time to figure out what you want. But know that if you do file, you'll be protected. Protected. It was a word that felt so foreign now. I used to think Megan and I protected each other. Now I was sitting in a lawyer's office, trying to protect myself from the person I thought I could trust the most. I left the lawyer's office feeling a strange mix of resolve and devastation. I had taken the first steps, but the path ahead was still dark and uncertain. Could I really go through with this? Could I let go of everything we'd built? As I pulled into the driveway of our house, my house now, I saw Megan's car parked outside. She was sitting on the front steps, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. I hadn't seen her since I told her to leave, and now, seeing her here again, it brought everything rushing back. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the confrontation I had been avoiding. The confrontation I knew would either break me or set me free. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She stood up slowly, wringing her hands together, her voice trembling. I needed to talk to you, Daniel. I need to tell you something. Something important. I crossed my arms, my mind racing. What is it now, Megan? What could possibly make this worse? She swallowed hard, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. Kyle. He's not who you think he is. There's more to this than I told you. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Just when I thought I had heard it all, another bombshell was about to drop. Megan's words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know if I could take any more. What else could there possibly be? I had already seen her betrayal from every painful angle. Now she was standing in front of me, looking as if she was about to shatter all over again. But I wasn't sure if I could handle another revelation. What do you mean, he's not who I think he is? I asked, my voice edged with frustration. You've already told me enough to wreck everything. What could be worse than that? She stepped forward, her hands trembling as she spoke. Kyle isn't just some guy I fell for. He's been conning me, Daniel. He never planned to run away with me. He used me. I stared at her, feeling a mix of disbelief and disgust. He used you? What are you talking about? She wiped her face, her breathing uneven as she struggled to explain. When we first started talking, he made me feel, I don't know, like I was special. Like I mattered. But as time went on, things changed. He started asking for things, small at first. Money for gas, help with bills. And I didn't think much of it. But then it escalated. He told me he had this plan to turn everything around, that if I helped him, we could build a new life together. I shook my head, my mind racing. So you gave him our money for this plan? And you thought that was a good idea? She nodded, her face contorted with regret. I was stupid. I know that now. But I didn't see it then. He was manipulating me the whole time. When I gave him the money for Vegas, I believed him. I believed we'd get it back, more than we put in. But when he lost everything, he disappeared. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. He disappeared? Megan nodded, tears streaming down her face. He's gone, Daniel. I've tried to reach him, called, texted, but it's like he vanished. He never cared about me. He just wanted the money. I was nothing to him. I clenched my fists, the rage bubbling up inside me again. The whole situation was spiraling into something far worse than I'd imagined. Not only had Megan betrayed me, but she had been played by this guy, this Kyle, and now we were both left with nothing. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice trembling with fury. You gave this guy $100,000 of our money, he gambled it all away, and now he's just gone? Megan nodded, her sobs growing louder. I know it's my fault. I should have seen it, but I didn't. I thought I was doing the right thing. But now I see that he was just using me. I paced back and forth, trying to make sense of the disaster she had created. It was all too much. The affair, the lies, the money, now this revelation that Kyle had been conning her all along. Every part of my life felt like it was crumbling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Megan, I said, stopping in front of her, my voice low and dangerous. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed us. You've destroyed everything. She broke down, collapsing onto the porch, her hands covering her face. I know. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve anything. But I'm begging you, Daniel, please, help me fix this. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. Fix this? How could we possibly fix this? The woman I loved had been sleeping with another man, falling in love with him, and now she wanted me to help clean up the mess? I don't even know where to begin, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. How could you be so reckless, Megan? How could you throw everything away for him? She looked up at me, her eyes desperate. I wasn't thinking. I was lost. I didn't see what was happening until it was too late. I wanted to yell, to scream, to make her feel the depth of the pain she had caused. But instead I just stood there, the weight of her actions crashing down on me. I had never felt so helpless, so broken. I can't do this, I said quietly, shaking my head. I can't fix this, Megan. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She got to her feet, stepping closer, her voice frantic. We can figure this out. We'll get the money back, we'll make it right. How, Megan? I snapped, cutting her off. How are we supposed to get the money back? He's gone. You let him walk away with everything, and now you expect me to just figure it out. That's not how this works. She fell silent, realizing the gravity of her mistake. There was no getting the money back. No magic solution that could undo what had been done. And then, in that moment of silence, an idea formed in my mind, one I didn't want to entertain, but couldn't shake. I had spent days trying to understand what had driven her to betray me, but now, I had to wonder. What if it wasn't just Kyle who was conning me? What if Megan wasn't as innocent in this as she wanted me to believe? The thought twisted my stomach. Could Megan have been in on it from the start? Had she known Kyle was going to disappear with the money? Was this whole sob story just another layer of her deception? I studied her face, trying to see through the tears, through the guilt, but I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Trust was shattered, and with it, my ability to believe anything she said. "Megan," I said slowly, my voice cold, "are you telling me the whole truth? Or are you leaving something out?" Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw something in her expression, something like fear. But she quickly shook her head, her voice shaky. "No. I've told you everything, Daniel. I swear." I didn't know what to believe anymore. Every part of me wanted to scream at her, to tear her apart for what she'd done. But instead I took a deep breath, stepping back. "I need more than words," I said finally, my voice tight. "If you want any chance of fixing this, you need to prove it. You need to give me everything. Phone records, messages, bank statements, everything." Megan nodded furiously, wiping away her tears. "I'll do it. I'll show you everything. I don't have anything left to hide." I wasn't sure if I believed her. But I was done playing the fool. If she had been lying to me from the start, if there was more to this story than she was letting on, I was going to find out. And if that was the case, I wasn't just going to lose my wife. I was going to make sure she lost everything. Megan handed over everything the next day. I made her bring every bit of evidence she could provide: phone logs, text messages, even her social media accounts. She was trembling the whole time, her fingers shaking as she typed in passwords, scrolling through her messages. I watched her like a hawk, trying to catch even the smallest flicker of hesitation or guilt. But nothing in what I found made me feel any better. The messages between her and Kyle were worse than I had imagined. There were hundreds of texts, each one revealing the depth of their affair, the lies she told me, and the fantasies they spun about a life without me. It wasn't just about the money. It was the intimacy. The way they talked about me like I was an obstacle, like I didn't matter. Seeing it all laid out in front of me, in black and white, made my blood boil. The woman I had trusted with everything, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, had been plotting a life that didn't include me. It wasn't just a mistake or a fling. It was deliberate. But as I dug deeper, something started to stand out. There was a pattern, small inconsistencies that didn't quite add up. Kyle's texts were often short, evasive, and manipulative. He asked for money in increasingly desperate ways, always making excuses for why he needed more. The more I read, the clearer it became. He had been stringing her along, pulling her deeper into his web, always promising a future that never materialized. Megan had been a fool to fall for him, but she wasn't the mastermind. That much was clear. And then there it was, the text that made my stomach drop. It was a message from Kyle, sent just days before he vanished, saying, "This is the last time, Megan. We're almost there. Once I get the cash, we're free. Don't worry about Daniel. He'll never know." A chill ran down my spine. Don't worry about Daniel. It was more than just a plan to leave me. It was calculated. Kyle had never intended to be a part of Megan's life. He was always planning to disappear the moment he got what he wanted. And Megan, blinded by her infatuation, had fallen for every lie he told. I looked up at her from the stack of messages. She sat on the couch, wringing her hands, her eyes red from crying. She had been telling the truth, at least about this part. Kyle had used her, and now we were both left to deal with the wreckage. But something still gnawed at me. It wasn't enough just to know she had been manipulated. She had still made the choice to betray me, to put her trust in him rather than in us. And I wasn't sure I could ever forgive her for that. "Megan," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "I see what happened with Kyle. I see how he played you." Her eyes lit up with a sliver of hope, as if this was her redemption. "I swear, Daniel, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't know." "I'm not done," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "He might have manipulated you, but that doesn't change what you did. You chose him. You chose to lie to me, to take our money and gamble it all away. You might have been a victim, but you're not innocent." Her face crumpled, the hope vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "I know," she whispered, her voice breaking. I know I ruined everything. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to control the storm of emotions swirling inside me. What I don't understand, I said more to myself than to her, is why you didn't come to me. Why didn't you stop when things started going wrong? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Megan looked up at me, her face full of sorrow. I was ashamed, Daniel. I was too deep into it. By the time I realized what a mess I had made, I couldn't face you. I thought I could fix it on my own, but then it just kept getting worse. And by the time Kyle disappeared, I knew there was no going back. I let her words sink in, but they didn't bring any comfort. Shame. That was her excuse. And while I could see how Kyle had manipulated her, that didn't erase the fact that she had lied to me, over and over again. I don't know what you expect me to do with all of this, I said finally, staring at the floor. How am I supposed to move on from this? How am I supposed to trust you again? Megan stood up, taking a tentative step toward me. I don't expect you to trust me. Not now. Maybe not ever. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to make this right. I'll do anything, Daniel. I'll go to therapy, I'll get a second job to pay back the money, whatever it takes. Her desperation was palpable, but it didn't move me the way it might have in the past. I had already decided what I needed to do. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said, watching her face as the words landed. She blinked, the color draining from her cheeks. You spoke to a lawyer? I nodded. I needed to know my options. I needed to protect myself, Megan. After everything that's happened, I can't just stand here and pretend like things can go back to the way they were. She took a shaky breath, her voice trembling. Are you going to leave me? I looked at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel any warmth toward her. Just cold detachment. I don't know yet, I admitted, my voice soft but firm. But I know one thing. Things can't stay like this. We're broken, Megan. And I don't know if we can be fixed. The silence between us was suffocating. Megan stared at me, her eyes pleading, but I had nothing left to give her. Not after everything. I'll stay with my mom for a while, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Give you space. I nodded, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. That's probably for the best. As she gathered her things and walked toward the door, I felt a strange sense of finality. This wasn't the end, not yet. But it was the beginning of it. She paused at the doorway, looking back at me one last time. Daniel, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I hope you know that. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. All I could do was watch as the door closed behind her, leaving me alone in the house we had built together, surrounded by the shattered pieces of what once was. And as I stood there in the silence, I realized that maybe this was the end after all. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit like and leave a comment with your favorite part. We'd love to hear your perspective.